This is Doleo, an original thriller fiction podcast presented in serialized format, a chapter at a time. Written by Jared Canton, narrated by Joshua Canton, a SteadyChaos production, 2019. Previously on Doleo. I learned a long time ago, year one of law school in fact, that the only bad thing a suspect can say to the police is anything at all. It is with this in mind that I sat face to face with Detective Ross, wondering why I had made the decision to abandon this one overriding principle, and in turn back myself into a preposterous corner. Ross hummed to himself in the chair across the room, at first for a short count, then he paused and restarted. This time it lasted minutes. At least 2 minutes of inane humming without a word. He stood and dragged a plastic chair with steel legs across the floor to my front. The friction of the steel on tile grinded and screeched, and further contributed to my unsettled state of mind. He plopped in it hard, as if standing exhausted him, before pulling out his notepad, licking his finger, and sifting through the pages as if they held the precious knowledge that could solve this case. He said, opening the conversation. "How's the investigation going?" I asked, pretending not to know. If the investigation was going well, I would have heard from him earlier, and he would have had a small task force with him. "You got big feet, Ryder?" His first warning shot. "Not particularly." "You mind?" He stood halfway, gesturing towards my shiny black dress shoes set neatly in the corner of the hospital room. "Not at all," I lied. He flipped back the tongue, jotted a note in his book, and dropped his trademark grunt again. 11, he said, then paused as he slithered back into his seat. "So you're on the roof of the parking garage, and you see this goon get ready to jump." "That's right. Basically." "And you see this Latin-slinging man in black. What should we call him? Sam?" "Sam." Ross shook his head slowly. "Murder 2 seems a more appropriate name." "I prefer Sam." "I don't," he said sternly. "It was just a thought." My joke fell on an extended moment of dead silence. "Okay, this murderer runs after the guy, reaches for him, then splat." "Sure." "Then he turns to you, spits out some Latin, and you flee?" "Right." "Did you see what he had on his feet?" "I saw where he was going. Shoes leave prints. Prints match mine. Vigilante no longer exists." "Not really. I know they were black." The more vague I was, the more likely he couldn't prove that such shoes couldn't possibly produce the footprint he had found, if he had in fact found one. "I see. I'm sure you can see where I'm going with this." "No, not really. I can't," I lied. "Not even a little. Enlighten me." "Well, when God created Earth, he also created the seasons, including the shitty cold ones. It just so happens that Boston winters are a bitch. Roads get icy. City drops sand. Sand infiltrates tire tread. Sand ends up in parking garages. The lonely life of sand. Well, eventually, it gets blown around the top floor, finds its way into all the nooks and crannies, particularly up against the walls." "So you have Sam's footprint?" "I have 2 sets of footprints. Not sure I'd say whose I have." His voice jabbed at me like an erect index finger. He might as well have just come out with it. "I have the dead guy's prints, and yours." Episode 14. Team Building. "That might be the most goddamn ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my entire goddamn life." My father's views on my idea were anything but veiled. "But it makes sense," I countered. "Let me get this straight. You make up this vigilante who, in an attempt to save the life of a felon, accidentally contributes to his death? In reality, there was no vigilante. Well, there was, but you were him. But you told the detective that he was him, and you were not? Now, your bright idea to get out of the lies you got yourself into by being so careless, so short-sighted, so very impetuous, is in fact to become the thing that you lied about?" Dad grasped the wheels on his chair and lurched himself forward. I hadn't previously noticed, but even as a paraplegic, he hadn't lost his tendency to pace when pissed off. "I'm not going to become him, I'm going to play him." I knew before I even finished the sentence that it was a bad choice of words. "You're going to play a vigilante?" Dad spun his chair back to face me. "You play checkers. You play backgammon. You don't play vigilante. Hear me out. Why should I? I can't believe... He coughed hard into his hand. Then again, what were you thinking? I panicked. I've never pushed somebody off a building before. This is uncharted territory. You should have just told the truth. Maybe, but I'd have lost my job, been turned into a laughingstock, splashed all over the news. My work, this life we have is all that I know. I wasn't ready to give it up. I guess, in retrospect, with what happened to Cindy, maybe it wasn't worth saving after all. What happened to her was awful, and you're taking it hard, I get it. But it's not your fault that a bad man did a bad thing. You do a lot of good in your work, and if you had just told the truth, everything would have worked itself out. Look at us. This world, Dad. Things don't just work themselves out. A city prosecutor chasing down criminals and tossing them off rooftops. Those types of things don't just wash away with the news cycle. It was an accident, Dad retorted. It wouldn't look that way, and I can't change my story now. I'd go to prison for obstruction. Do you have any idea what would happen to me in prison? Do you know how many people I've helped put in that place? Dad nodded, conceding my point. This is an easy fix. I take a few case files, make it look like the vigilante follows the newspapers, and I slap a hurting on some bad guys. And how do you pin it on this vigilante you created? I'll give him a calling card. Make it a dunce cap. I'm serious, Dad. So am I. You haven't thought this through, because if you had, you'd be anything but serious about this ridiculous idea. I'm doing this, but I need you with me. Like a pouting child, Dad rotated his chair away from me and sat. What if you're hurt? He asked, still facing away from me. His voice cracked as he said it. It's better than going to prison. And once you create this vigilante, who's to say they won't keep searching for him until they find him? Dad paused. Until they find you. I'll figure that out when the time comes. Dad appeared deep in contemplation, and he ran a hand through the mop of hair atop his head. I can't get behind this. I can't sit idly by and watch you throw your life away. I won't watch you chase away trouble by making more of it. Dad, it's not just about pinning blame on a vigilante. Maybe this is why I am the way I am. What if this is why we've been through everything we've been through? Maybe CIPA isn't a curse after all. Maybe I can help people, just in a different way. By getting yourself killed? No, by preventing other people from ending up like Cindy. Like you. My eyes glazed over with wetness. My life, my training, my education, my job, it all adds up to someone that can make a real difference before people are hurt, instead of sitting idly by waiting for them to be hurt. But I need you with me. What do you need from me? How could I possibly help with this? He forced an exaggerated look down at his chair. There was no delicate way to say it. Dad, since I was a kid, you've barely left the house, but you always managed to have what I needed. I need you to get the stuff on this list, but I can't have it tracked back to either of us. I walked forward and put my hand on his shoulder. It was tense, taut like a muscle at work. He took the list and read it aloud. Enforcer Max, cut-resistant number DNR3 gloves, GXD101 goggles with shatterproof lenses, SGT1001P tactical wear, alumina oxide chest plate, ABA bulletproof vest, Cryotex belt holster. He read mechanically, the way a person does when reading a subject they're unfamiliar with. Jesus, Ryder, are you serious? I need everything on that list, and I need it in black. Dad had insisted on one mandatory condition before he'd agree to help me, and it would be challenging, but it was a challenge I'd been preparing for. He demanded that I enroll the assistance of one additional person. The doctor from that hospital, he said. Apparently, she hadn't told Dad her name either, so maybe it wasn't our overwhelming chemistry that distracted her from introductions. Maybe she was just rude. His insistence on her involvement revolved around the overwhelming anxiety he felt about potentially performing check. He didn't want to be responsible for inspecting my body for injury after a mission. It was an obligation he simply couldn't endure. Should he miss a sign, or lack the necessary training to address an issue he did diagnose, he couldn't bear the consequences. No doctor meant no cooperation, and this was not an endeavor I could realistically or emotionally pursue without some level of support. I suspected a frontal assault on enlisting Dr. Blaze's help would fail fantastically. The idea of a blossoming medical professional longing to assist a rookie vigilante was not only far-fetched, it bordered on insane. On top of that, outright asking for her help would likely trigger some mandated medical professional responsibility that would require her to report my imminent illegal behavior to the authorities. As such, a more nuanced approach would be required. And as I knew too well, the easiest way to get someone's help is to offer to fulfill a need, and I suspected that I had just the need. When I arrived, she was sitting alone at a small table edged by a wooden planter. She wiped the dew off her water glass with the back of her index finger, like a tiny windshield wiper. She was wearing gray dress pants and a white top that buttoned down the front, with a firm collar that sprayed out just below her ears. She hunched slightly, elbows on the table. Her hair was down, and from my approach at her left, I could tell it was past shoulder length. A blondish lock dangled over the front of her left shoulder, venturing down just a hint of cleavage at her shirt's opening. She turned to face me, standing briefly as I arrived at the table. "Please," she gestured to the seat across from her. I complied with a smile. "Fashionably late?" she continued. "Long week at the office." It had been, in retrospect, a very long, revealing, life-changing week. I can imagine. The poor girl that died. Did you know her well? I'd only spoken with her a couple times, but she was there that day because of me. I'm sorry. Occupational hazard. I dismissed her condolences, hoping to foster an illusion that I was dealing with the trauma in a healthy manner. Dad would argue I was not. I meant to ask, what does your job entail exactly? Do you prosecute cases? Not really. I sit second chair like a backup. I'm more of a victim's advocate. I prep them along with the other stakeholder witnesses. It's kind of a unique role. Not every state embraces the concept. And you prepped that girl? I did. I convinced her to testify, told her the only way he could harm anyone again is if she didn't stand up and face him. A look of dread danced across her girlish face before she pushed a balled fist to her mouth and cleared her throat. When she pulled her hand away, a combination of sympathy and regret had replaced the previous look on her face. "I'm sorry, I didn't... It's okay. I know why she died, and I know my part in it." "You don't blame yourself?" "Somewhat. I blame myself for my participation in a system that repeatedly shows its true, dark, shadowy colors to those that dare to believe in it." I paused. I didn't feel she had earned this earnestness, this honesty, yet. "Are you a shrink or genetics expert?" "I have a healthy curiosity for most of the sciences," she chuckled. Her hair and body bounced gently in sync with her laugh. She was impressive, thoughtful but with a witty hardness, the kind of person that made you believe in intelligent design, even if you thought you knew better. She was a strategic combination of fierce competence and grace. She continued, "I guess you're wondering why you're here. Admittedly, although I prefer to credit this face and my boyish charms." "How adorably naive," she countered, stone-faced, and then a crooked smile hinted at sarcasm. "Naivete can be a comforting relief in times like these," I said. The waiter appeared. "Can I get you two something to drink?" "Can I just get a bottled water?" she said, as if asking permission. "Fine, ma'am. And you, sir?" "Aberlour 12, rocks." "Surely." And with that, the waiter darted away, as if fueled by pure caffeine. "A Scotchman?" she asked. "It's kind of funny. I used to hate the taste. When I was young, my dad told me that nothing warmed him up on those Maine winter nights like a glass of scotch. When I had my first glass at 16, I had hoped to feel what that warmth was like." "Did you?" "No. I threw up on his coat. Guess he needed the scotch to keep him warm after that." She laughed, and it made me want to pull more out of her. "Is that a true story?" "Mostly." "Well, I would kindly request that from here on you keep your stories historically accurate, or at least provide some kind of disclaimer when you venture into creative storytelling." I nodded. "The reason I asked you here, well, there are two reasons. The first, I'd be honored if you'd be willing to participate in a study I'm running." "You want me to be a lab rat?" I was half insulted, half disappointed, well, out of halves. I was honestly not surprised. That said, a study meant more time with her. More time with her felt right. And as I had suspected, now we both needed favors. "No, not like that. No prodding or poking, more of a study in regards to how you got here, where you come from, how you're so... normal." "Ouch." "No, you're hardly normal. I mean, a disappointing percentage of CIPA patients even make it to your age." "So I'm old?" "No, I didn't. I'm kidding." She laughed. I understand that most people with my condition face obstacles that I haven't. I thank my dad every day for his careful attention to my disease growing up, because one fever, one bleeding organ, one bout of hypothermia, and maybe I'm not here today. Maybe you should study him. He's a great man. Maybe he's the reason I succeeded where others failed. I think we both know it's more than that. Many CIPA children have loving, dedicated parents. Some even have two. That doesn't stop their joints from deteriorating, or their minds from atrophying, legs from breaking. There's something special about you, and I want to find out what it is, especially if it's physiological, so I can help others like you. I'm touched you noticed. Absent your tireless self-confidence, you are truly unique. It's a gift, I grunted, I imagine unconvincingly. In med school, I did my dissertation on 5 genetic mutations that could take hold and create paths for evolutionary tracks. Well, your condition was one that I suggested was poorly designed for the long term. In fact, I suggested within a few generations the disease should all but disappear. Because most of us don't live long? A bit of an oversimplification, but yes. So I was nearly accepted for publication in a top medical journal, but they wanted more of a personal touch. I think if we discussed your life, reviewed your medical history, and I wrote your case into the report, I could get it published. Everything would be confidential, of course. So what do I have to do? Meet with me a few times over the next several weeks. Sign a release authorizing me to review all your medical records. Answer some questions. We were interrupted by the waiter and my golden glass of scotch. It looked a bit like motor oil. The waiter slid our drinks to the tabletop. The ice from my glass clinked back and forth. I gave him a thankful grin. He nodded. Are you ready to order? He asked politely, but with a touch of the impatience that all efficient waiters have. I am, Kinsley said, and she recited her order without glancing back at the menu. There was chicken in it, I think. I'll have that too, I said, not one to be overly picky with my meals. Thank you, he said as he pivoted on a heel and departed into the crowd of tables and clattering forks against plates. He's like a magician, I said. We all have our acts. Was that a shot? I clasped my hands and rested my chin on them mockingly, gazing into her eyes. You just seem on your game, or A game at least. Arms up and always ready. She shadow-boxed, a jab, followed by a cross directed at an imaginary foe. When you can be hurt, but you can't tell, caution is a good thing. But I'm not a shard of glass hidden in the sand. I'm not a threat. I want to know you, help people like you. Aren't you, though? Why would you say such? I just don't get it. All this for a paper? It's not just a paper. I thought you'd understand, a writer of sorts yourself. You do your homework, I'll give you that. Coming into the field with a published paper would be instrumental for my career, being young and female, and, well, what? I knew what her last word was, but I knew she was too modest to say it. You know, her hands nervously danced up and around her face. It's tough for people with Tourette's to get ahead, I quipped. Being young and decent-looking can be a challenge, professionally. You think you're too pretty to be taken seriously? I accused with a smile, although I understood her concern. I think a publication could give me credibility beyond my appearance and years. You said there were 2 reasons you asked me here. What's the second? I don't know. You do. I think you're interesting. She gave in surprisingly quickly. As interesting as the guy that gave you that? I nodded towards her left hand as I tipped the scotch back. I tried not to grimace as it hit my tongue. She flattened her left hand and webbed out her fingers. She reached over with her right hand and straightened the diamond. I swore it was as big as the chandelier in my dining room entryway. Yes, but in a different way. And how am I different? I asked. You challenge me. And don't get ahead of yourself. What I mean is, you challenge me. Bring the competitor out in me through contest, like a rival, Magic and Bird. I love that she knew the significance of Magic and Bird. Isn't that a good thing? It absolutely is. It's why I look forward to working more with you. And he isn't like a rival at all. He's like my teammate. He gets me water, slaps me on the butt when I make a good play. She laughed and continued. You get the point. Why does he get all the good jobs? He's supportive and kind, she finished. So, I looked up dazed for a moment. So what? I knew she wasn't still talking about slaps on the butt. Will you work with me? Under some parameters, and only under these parameters. I recalled Dad's instruction. She's in, or he's out. Okay. Her face brightened as if she invited my conditions. First, you have to become my doctor. Agreed. Secondly, I need you on call. How so? I hurt myself doing some pretty mundane things, and I hurt myself making some highly questionable decisions. If I call, you come. To your place? Yes. Is that appropriate? My dad lives with me. It's not like that. We won't be... I shifted to a spooky voice like a cheesy Halloween commercial. Alone. Stop it, she demanded. Is that it? And you have to sign a non-disclosure agreement. You lawyers. It was not a compliment. You can't tell anyone that you're working with or treating me, and all references in your paper must be made under a pseudonym. I'll have to tell my instructing physician. No deal. She paused, contemplated, and began to say something before stopping. With a gentle exhale and a look of hesitancy, she nodded. Now, can we just relax and eat? I asked with a victorious smile. Dad had said that I had to enlist her help, but he didn't say I had to tell her exactly what she was signing up for. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed Doleo, please come back for future episodes arriving at regular intervals, and subscribe and rate us on your favorite podcast application. If you enjoyed this production, please visit the SteadyChaos Productions YouTube page and subscribe for more content from our production team.